This video essay focuses on a subjective interpretation of a piece of media, separate from the author's original intent. Content warnings for the discussions of epilepsy and seizures, seizure descriptions, medication mentions, and visual depiction of crabs. Hi, I'm Siri, and this is Unrequested Media Commentary. Today I want to talk about an oddly specific take that I have on the adventures on graduation, and unless you've read the title of the video, which may be related to it, you might not know where I will be going with this. I want to talk about how Fitzroy Maplecourt's character arc, TAZ Graduation, and Wild Magic of D&D 5e offer narrative aspects that invite to think about chronic illnesses, diagnosis of these conditions, and invisible disabilities, specifically in relation to epilepsy. First, I will go through Fitzroy Maplecourt's character journey during the podcast and how it compares to receiving an epilepsy diagnosis fresh off the shelf. Next, I will address why I think the Wild Magic mechanic offers fantastic tools for writers who may want to create a more authentic image of representation. Last, I want to briefly address why accidental or unintended representation matters. My view on the matter is not universal. You're allowed to disagree with me. I'm not here to argue with you over a fictional character, which does not belong to me, nor does it belong to you. Unless you're Griffin McElroy, in which case, okay. My perspective on this entire subject is informed by having listened to this D&D adventure a couple of times, and my own history with epileptic seizures, and everything that comes with it. If you happen to hate the adventures on graduation, then that's okay. We don't have to agree on all things to discuss themes and ideas. For the uninitiated, I will briefly summarize what epilepsy is and what seizures are. I am no medical professional. My explanation will be focused around explaining it so that everyone can somewhat understand what a seizure is and why it's so bad to have one. For the epilepsy part, the Epilepsy Foundation words their description of the condition really well, in my opinion. The following quote is taken from their website, epilepsy.com. Epilepsy is a brain disorder that causes recurring, unprovoked seizures. Your doctor may diagnose you with epilepsy if you have 2 unprovoked seizures, or 1 unprovoked seizure with a high risk of more. Not all seizures are the result of epilepsy. Seizures may relate to a brain injury or a family trait, but often the cause is completely unknown. The word epilepsy simply means the same thing as seizure disorders. It does not state anything about the cause of the person's seizures or their severity. Now, personally, I like to compare seizures to my brain kind of going into blue screen mode and having to reboot. There are a variety of seizure types, but the one mostly depicted in media is the tonic-clonic seizure, formerly known as the grand mal seizure. These seizures are what you imagine when you hear the word seizure. A person goes unconscious, possibly falls to the ground, their entire body or just part of it are super tense and possibly shaking, making odd movements. Some people who experience seizures have an aura, a sort of feeling that they will have a seizure soon. Others will get a seizure without any prior warning. A seizure can lead directly to death, but other side effects include the worst headache you can possibly imagine, memory loss, trouble memorizing things, days or even weeks after a seizure, disorientation, vomiting, permanent brain damage. These symptoms can show up individually or all together. You don't get to choose this. Let's just shorten it for now as it's not fun. Some people have seizures daily, others have them only once a year or every few years. Epilepsy comes in many variations, No case is exactly the same, but there are still some common experiences that you can find listed in online spaces and your own community. There is medication available for epilepsy. In fact, there's a bit of a variety, which is great. But still, not every case of epilepsy can be treated successfully with medication, and being on medication is not a get out of the theater seizure-free card. It's more like, maybe you have less seizures now? When you don't have a seizure, a lot of people with epilepsy can lead fairly normal lives. Outside of maybe not drinking alcohol and not necessarily being allowed to get a driver's license, the most important thing to leading a somewhat normal life with a seizure condition is to know your triggers, so what causes a seizure, and to avoid it as best as you can. It's a bit like Minesweeper, except there's no actual system of winning. Triggers can be, but are not limited to, stress, hyperventilation, heat exposure, fever, dehydration, flashing lights, missing your medication, sleep deprivation, irregular sleep schedules. Some and all of those just mentioned combined. There are common triggers like the ones that I've just named, but there are more than that, and sometimes people don't even know their triggers or what causes them to have a seizure. It honestly feels like Russian roulette. You don't know what you'll get. Sometimes you can link a seizure that you're experiencing directly to, okay, I just watched a flashy movie. But sometimes you will just be having a good time out with your friends, not drinking, not being stressed, nothing. You have the greatest time of your life, you have a great dinner, and boom, seizure. There's no guarantee that you can always link your seizure to a specific trigger, and that is the frustrating part. If you'd like to learn more on the subject of epilepsy, there are a lot of useful resources linked below in the video description. It's especially worth learning about other seizure types, such as absence seizures, as those can be super hard to figure out. Moving on. In the Adventure Zone Graduation, which is a podcast by the McElroy brothers and their dad, they play Dungeons and Dragons, and specifically in Graduation, it is set in a sort of university setting. The students are trained to be heroes, villains, sidekicks, henchpeople, which in the world of NUA translates essentially to glorified open-world wrestling matches. There are a lot of other things going on, such as demon wars, paperwork, and questions of change and status quo, but these themes have been discussed to death, and they hold no further relevance right now for the points I want to make today. Let's focus on Fitzroy Maplecourt, Knight in Absentia in the realm of Good Castle. Fitzroy, who started out as an aspiring knight, essentially lost his scholarship and student status due to him experiencing what is described as an unprecedented surge of wild magic in a classroom setting. And due to this incident, he was expelled or transferred. The text is not super clear on the exact mechanics there, but he is being transferred to the titular school of Hieronymus Wiggenstaff's School of Heroism and Villainy. Fitzroy starts out as a character who puts up a bit of a spoiled rich boy front who suddenly gained magic powers. He loves capes, sweet crepes, and he is confirmed to be asexual, so nice rep. He wears fake glasses. He very much starts out having no idea what the hell he is actually doing with his life now. His dreams got crushed by his sudden newfound abilities, and he doesn't have control over them. By the end of the adventure, Fitzroy has not just learned to accept his newfound abilities, he fully embraces them. And also he loses the last bits of insecurity around his magic. A classic character journey, really. And now, let's look at it through the epilepsy lens. I will not be focusing on any specific play styles or DMing choices here. First of all, the way that Fitzroy's former educational institution treated his wild magic is fantastic in showcasing the ineptitude of institutions to accommodate people with disabilities. Back when I had my worst streak of seizures in the grades 7 to 10, which should equate to what the English-speaking world would call secondary school, my school and teachers did not handle the entire situation with much grace. At the time, I had no idea that my medication and the seizures could lead to several issues with a learning environment. Onto Fitzroy. He gets expelled or transferred because of a situation that he had no more control over than anyone watching him having this situation happen. What I take away from this is that if he said that he had no control over this magic catfish transformation, he was not believed by the institution. They looked at that and went like, oh, so your entire year of not being able to cast a spell, that was all just delinquency. We will now just expel you because clearly you just on purpose kind of attacked your teacher, which I find ridiculous. But also, sadly, it's not too far away from reality in terms of telling people with disabilities that they just don't try hard enough. The sudden wild magic surge essentially puts Fitzroy in a situation where he has a seizure in class and he, by accident, injures a faculty member, and this gets him punished instead of actual treatment or diagnosis. The responsibility to figure out what the heck is going on with him is put upon a different institution and Fitzroy alone. Fitzroy feels shame towards his magic, similar to how people with epilepsy are being made to feel ashamed or to even hide their condition, because talking about seizures and having epilepsy makes people so uncomfortable. It's almost a hobby of mine to just kind of vibe check people by bringing it up, just to see how people react. It's an instant vibe check, just how awkward are people around seizures and the topic of them. And I understand that you would be awkward with them if you're not familiar with the topic. But if I tell you that I have epilepsy, don't ask me, oh, have you tried weed yet? I have heard that weed really helps with the epilepsy. The issue does not lie with the use of cannabis or drugs. The issue lies in suggesting cannabis or other drugs to a person who is possibly already medicated. Those chemicals can interact and cause new side effects or more seizures. Maybe instead ask, hey, I'm not sure, is there anything specific I should do in case you have a seizure? And then this person can say, yeah, actually, I have a first aid kit with me. This shame that people feel around epilepsy can lead to being socially isolated, taking unnecessary risks for the sake of fitting in, or experiencing inappropriate or even damaging first aid responses. And now, I would like to interrupt this section to read to you the appropriate response to an emergency case where somebody has a seizure and you have to administer first aid. The following steps are being read from the website of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. First, do I call 911? Seizures do not usually require emergency medical attention. Only call 911 if one or more of these are true. The person has never had a seizure before. The person has difficulty breathing or waking after the seizure. The seizure lasts longer than 5 minutes. The person has another seizure soon after the first one. The person is hurt during the seizure. The seizure happens in water. The person has a health condition like diabetes, heart disease, or is pregnant. On to first aid for any type of seizure. There are many types of seizures. Most seizures end in a few minutes. These are general steps to help someone who is having any type seizure. Stay with the person until the seizure ends and they are fully awake. After the seizure ends, help the person sit in a safe place. Once they are alert and able to communicate, tell them what happened in very simple terms. Comfort the person and speak calmly. Check to see if the person is wearing a medical bracelet or other emergency information. Keep yourself and other people calm. Offer to call a taxi or another person to make sure the person gets home safely. First aid for generalized tonic-clonic grand mal seizures. When most people think of a seizure, they think of a generalized tonic-clonic seizure. In this type of seizure, the person may cry out, fall, shake or jerk, and become unaware of what's going on around them. Here are things you can do to help someone who is having this type of seizure. Ease the person to the floor. Turn the person gently onto one side. This will help the person breathe. Clear the area around the person of anything hard or sharp. This can prevent injury. Put something soft and flat, like a folded jacket, under their head. Remove glasses. Loosen ties or anything around their neck that may make it hard to breathe. Time the seizure. Call 911 if the seizure lasts longer than 5 minutes. And now what you should never do in a first aid situation with seizures. Knowing what not to do is important for keeping a person safe during or after a seizure. Never do any of the following things. Do not hold the person down or try to stop his or her movements. Do not put anything in the person's mouth. This can injure teeth or the jaw. Do not try to give mouth-to-mouth breaths, like CPR. People usually start breathing again on their own after a seizure. Do not offer the person water or food until they are fully alert. With all that said and done, let's go back to the podcast. At his new school, Fitzroy arrives and the faculty members already know about him and the magic situation.
We're very excited to work with you. We've never had a student with your abilities before. It's very interesting.
Fascinated. Cool. Like a science experiment. Fun.
No, please don't misunderstand me. You're very special. You should feel very proud.
Yeah, so proud. So proud. Proud like a baby child of mine. Love it. Love the powers.
Oh, excellent.
I was being extremely facetious. They've ruined my life.
I don't mean to upset you, but, I was under the impression that you failed out of Clyde Nite's night school.
Failed's a way of, failed's one way of, but not my way of, I have credits. I should have credits.
Oh, you're the failed one, right?
That is the worst. Sir Fitzroy Maplecourt.
Yes! You're the one whose magic came and ruined everything for you.
Yep, I love talking about it so casually.
He is not given comfort or proper reassurance that he will receive the help he needs. Instead, he is being let known that everyone knows what happened and why he is here, and that he is the failure of Clyde Nite's night school. He is the transfer student. That is not a good way to welcome a new student with a possible magic disability. There is a difference in telling someone that you know why they transferred to your school versus telling them you know why they are here and offering them a proper support system. Festo, Fitzroy's magic teacher, is probably the only one who really offers a proper space to explore this whole magic thing. I think Festo is kind of like Fitzroy's very weird neurologist. A neurologist, by the way, is a doctor who specializes in diagnosing and treating conditions related to the spinal cord, the nerves, and the brain. If you have epilepsy or you have the suspicion of having had a seizure, you want to get transferred to a neurologist. If all neurologists had as much time for their patients as Festo the fairy, that would be great. But even when they don't, they do offer patients usually some basic knowledge on how to move forward with their epilepsy diagnosis. And in a way, this is exactly what Festo does. They give advice to Fitzroy, they teach him spells, they check in on him.
Tell Festo about your magic.
It is, Festo, have you ever had a dream?
Festo dreams?
No, I'm sorry, like an ambition?
No.
You've never had something that you've...
The fairy folk live in the moment.
Okay. But you've never had something that you've wanted your entire life? Like...
I want to party.
Where I was going with that is I wanted to be a knight my entire life. So I do not know if you know this. I was enrolled at Clyde Knight's Nite School and was... in my final semester training personally under Sylvia Knight, the headmaster there, and I did catfish her, by which I mean I turned her into a catfish with a magical blast that I did not know that I had inside of me, and so I was removed from the academy, and now I'm here. So that's kind of where I'm getting in touch with my magic, you know? Really looking inside.
And that was your first magic?
That was my first magic, yes. What an unpleasant way for it to blossom.
How do you feel when you use your magic?
There is a certain loss of control that is the pits. And so mostly shameful. Oh no, if you had some sort of like orb that I could touch and then it would eat up my magic. Do you have such a cube?
No!
Now, there are gripes to be had with Festo, specifically in episode 35 of the podcast, but those points are not necessarily relevant to what I want to talk about here. There are only few moments where other characters actually ask Fitzroy how he's specifically doing. The only other time that I currently remember is essentially, it's not coming from the institutional staff of the school, but instead it's the very source of what gave Fitzroy his magic.
How are you enjoying the magic?
Honest answer?
Yes, please.
It's all right. I'm not especially great at it, which is troubling. Obviously, my life could have gone a completely different, non-sort of catfishy route had it not manifested, and I think I probably would have been doing pretty well if, that particular door had slid open, but it didn't, and so now I have these random powers that I can't quite control, and so that is disappointing.
I don't know if I want to let that count, because it sounds like my epilepsy talking to me and telling me like, hey, yo, you vibing? Is this good? You want more or less seizures? How are you feeling? So this does not line up really well. I think the interesting thing about this entire situation is, even in a magic world where magic is ever present and very prominent and incredibly common, even in that type of world, there's no make magic go away solution to Fitzroy's situation. And instead, he is given a spectral magic crab, which Fitzroy names Snippers. A magic familiar may not be the perfect analogy for medication, but aside from medication, there are also service animals that can detect auras and upcoming seizures in their owners. The concept that Snippers functions as a service animal is supported later on by the appearance of a spectral hawk within a bar.
Now, Springs Eternal is the local tavern, and it's run by, you all know this, everyone knows this, by Barb, the bartender. Now, as you head in, you notice that on a perch above the bar is a spectral hawk, looking exactly like it's made of the same stuff as Snippers.
Oh, okay, one sparkling yerba mate, please.
And she turns around.
Straight up!
And kind of cocks her head to the side and peers at you through dark glasses and says, yeah, what other way is there to drink a sparkling yerba mate? Come on.
Where is the boss of the mine?
Oh, yeah, you're looking for Jared. And you see the hawk look left and right and then lock on to a person sitting at a table, and she says, yeah, he's sitting over there at the back.
I pick up Snippers and start petting his kite, and I say, I see you went with a hawk, did you? Interesting.
Yeah, the eyesight helps.
So now we have the proof within the text of TAZ Graduation that the spell Find Familiar is being used to summon animals within service animal roles. Moving on, I will be treating Snippers as basically equivalent to medication and a service animal. If you think about it, he's a 2-in-1 solution, really. The campaign continues, and there is an episode at about episode 15 where Fitzroy is being cursed and the audience experiences a sort of flashback episode. It's stitched together by Travis as a DM, Griffin as a player, of Fitzroy, obviously. Griffin is, as a player, reacting to this nightmare version of how Fitzroy got expelled. And then there's the never-ending support of his companions. Now, I don't remember my seizures super well. I mean, I'm passed out for most of the time. What do you expect? I mostly remember the before and after. I have gaps in between what happens between that. What has always made a strong, lasting impression, however, has been whenever people help me during or after a seizure, especially if they manage to treat me in a calm and gentle manner with patience and proper support. One of the worst things I've had happen was a seizure in middle school after PE. When I woke up in the changing room, there was a teacher, and they were asking me questions. I was asked who my homeroom teacher was at the time so that they could be notified. And because there were several students in the changing room of different classes, he had to ask that question. I had been attending that grade for almost a year with all these teachers, and at the moment when I came to, I was completely unable to recall any teacher names that of any of the current teachers that I had. I remembered exactly with absolute vividness the names of the teachers of previous years, but it was incredibly stressful having to come up with an answer to this question. That was not great. The best support for me has always been if people asked simple yes/no questions, relatively calm, and if there weren't 20 to 30 other people in the room with me, gawking at whatever I had just done. Privacy is such a nice state to have when you're in that situation.
You're now sitting outside of her office. You can hear her speaking with other professors. You don't catch much of it, but it has become clear to you that your time here at the school has come to an end. How do you feel?
Now I just feel crushed.
The flashback reveals the absolute buffoonery and incompetence with which his previous school handled the incident of a teacher being temporarily turned into a catfish. The fact that in a world of magic, there is no accommodation for people with uncontrolled or not well-controlled magic translates well to the systems that we currently have in a lot of places that are not equipped to accommodate disabilities and neurodivergency of any kind. I would now like to talk about a character who ends up being one of Fitzroy's closest allies, Rainier Michelle. She is a visibly disabled woman with a specifically crafted mobility aid. Canonically, Rainier faces stigma more coming from her special talents for necromancy than for being physically disabled. She is being typecast into the role and the education of a villain, despite not being actually evil. It is something that she has come to embrace and to accept. So, Rainier can relate a good amount to being misunderstood and stigmatized because of a certain type of magic. There may or may not be certain similarities in how Rainier's magic is being treated and Rainier has been treated because of her magic, and to how Fitzroy is being treated because of his wild magic. In the context of disability and chronic illness, I would like to use her and Fitzroy's relationship as an example for solidarity amongst people with disabilities. Since accessibility and disability are both very diverse and nigh impossible to accommodate in a singular solution, it can be hard to find people who you relate to, even among other people with disabilities or chronic illnesses. Everyone is raised with misconceptions and biases towards disability. Ableism is deeply ingrained in the workings of our lives. I cannot exclude myself from acting ableist, but I try to make an effort and to learn more in how to be less so. I cannot stress enough how important and helpful it has been for me to find people online who also have epilepsy or similar conditions. Whenever I meet a fellow epileptic in real life, we kinda high-five just upon realizing that we have the same diagnosis, and we talk about what type of medication we take. Meeting people with similar experiences to your own defeats the crippling sense of isolation and loneliness you'd easily develop when facing a new diagnosis. Rainier does her best to make Fitzroy feel less like a failure, to make him feel loved and welcome at the new school, to warm him up to his newfound profession, and she clearly shows a healthy amount of confidence despite the judgment she faces coming from a society who looked upon her magic abilities and said, "You must play the role of a villain, because we said so." While our medical histories are always unique, the ways society and political systems treat people with chronic illnesses, disabilities, and mental health conditions creates a lot of universal experiences. We may be special or unique, but we're not alone in our struggles. And knowing there are people who go through similar experiences eases the mind and gives us back part of the control of our lives that has been taken from us. And ultimately, that is a major aspect of people with epilepsy, getting control back over your life, because the diagnosis often takes a lot of that away from you. Editing right now, and I need to specify that, of course, the diagnosis of epilepsy is not what takes control away, but the consequences of being diagnosed with epilepsy, because it impacts your life so heavily, especially in the beginning of being diagnosed and receiving treatment, which, by the way, this is not an argument against getting an official diagnosis. If anything, I encourage anyone who experiences something even remotely similar to a seizure to seek out a neurologist or just any medical opinion, really. I just want to say that the moment that you are diagnosed, it's not just that you have seizures, it's also that you have to create accommodations within your life to have less seizures and to cope with the consequences of having had seizures. This can vary from not being allowed to drive anymore, to not drinking, to not being able to work full-time, part-time, or at all. A lot of life with epilepsy comes down to gaining some resemblance of independence and control. This is another point that makes Fitzroy so relatable. He struggles and tries to get back the control over his life that he once had. Getting control over your life and your life circumstances is something that takes years and sometimes forever, and sometimes you won't get the amount of control and freedom that you once had or that other people have. Now, as the story progresses, Fitzroy gets more and more cozy with his magic abilities. He does have the occasional wild magic surge, but he is no longer openly ashamed of his situation. He has come to sort of accept that things are the way they are, and he manages just fine, given the circumstances of everything. And, after the initial shock and adjustments to a diagnosis, you settle in. You take your meds, you follow your treatment to the best of your abilities. Sometimes there is a setback, sure. You still experience a situation of exclusion and annoyance, but you learn to deal with it. Then there is a turning point. The source of Fitzroy's wild magic takes away his powers. Now, I like to view this part as follows. Fitzroy thinks his seizures are gone for good. It is not unheard of that some patients outgrow their epilepsy. Outgrowing epilepsy refers to some types of childhood epilepsy, where children at some point become seizure-free and do not have to take any further medication. Sometimes epilepsy is considered to be resolved. This applies to people who have not had a seizure in 10 years and who have been able to stop their medication for at least 5 of those years. Whether or not your epilepsy is resolved is pretty much unpredictable. If you take your medication and have no seizures for years to come, it does not mean that your epilepsy is cured. It just means that your medication is working. Obviously, this is a point where the comparison between disability and magic kind of starts to fall flat. If you lose your magic powers, you suddenly have disadvantages that you did not have before. When you are suddenly, for some reason, not disabled anymore, there are no clear disadvantages to that happening, Simply saying order made Fitzroy not have epilepsy anymore is a reading that we can apply, but I think it does not really contribute to this entire line of thought that we're having right here, right now. Festo's reaction to Fitzroy's loss of magic powers works best to continue this entire video.
What the fuck?
Yeah, see? Yes, I found out...
Snippers!
This bit here makes me think of framing the situation as follows. Fitzroy, for whatever reason, stops taking his meds. It's less that he does not have wild magic / epilepsy anymore. It's more that he is under the impression that it's gone because nothing bad has happened in a while. Now, the consequence is that maybe he feels fine because the side effects of the medication are gone, or he also feels maybe lost and is not sure on what to do now because he has built a lot of his current life around the diagnosis. This is the fun part, right? You never really know if your epilepsy is truly gone, and then your neurologist very much tells you, yeah, you may think it's gone, but maybe it's still there. Now, The very messed up thing about stopping your medication, sometimes you don't even know they actually work until you stop taking them. But the anxieties and hopes that comes with just attempting to pretend I'm fine now, so maybe I should stop taking my meds. A decision to make. And everyone needs to decide differently. I personally choose to stay safe, but I'm not going to judge anyone who has the hope that they want to attempt to go essentially med-free, seizure-free, after they have confirmed this with their doctor. Do not do this without asking your doctor. Like, seriously, don't stop taking your meds just because you feel like it. Talk to your doctor before you stop taking meds. You can't just quit them cold turkey. It's a bad idea. It really is. Fitzroy, assuming that he is without magic of his own, is in this case equivalent to a person with epilepsy assuming that their epilepsy got resolved. Following the loss of his powers, Fitzroy seeks Festo's advice regarding his magic abilities. Festo basically tells Fitzroy off for thinking that his magic powers solely rely on the deity named Chaos, who caused the wild magic surges erupting from within him. Festo insists that Fitzroy should have magic powers on his own that he can rely on.
All right, Festo, I guess I'll try and find the magic within me. I thought I already did that, but I guess I only made it down to, like, my torso. I'll dig down deeper. Maybe there's something in my, like, lower thigh that's like,
Close your
there
eyes.
it is. Yep.
Clear your mind. Take a breath. Are you ready?
Yep.
And cast.
If you think about any type of story, really, many of them have a moment where a teacher figure helps the student figure find their real powers within and unleash and control and channel them within, like, either a training montage or just a singular spiritual session of very deep meditation. Or the character gets handed a magic item or sword to channel their powers through, and then everything is kind of fine and solved from there on. The character then barely experiences any struggles anymore, if at all, and sometimes the entire subject of, like, hey, can you control your powers, is just dropped after just a while because it's no longer relevant. And I get why writers opt for a solution that permanently fixes an issue that a character has surrounding their powers. It is a power fantasy. A beautiful thought that with a singular solution, all future problems surrounding a strong magical power will just be solved. But that way, any possible reference towards disability falls flat, because accommodation and accessibility make life easier, but they don't make the chronic illness, disability, or mental health condition just go away forever. Now it gets fucking interesting. I said I wouldn't talk much about the DMing or player decisions, but I guess I lied when I wrote this original script a month ago, because then I thought, like, yeah, it's just gonna wrap up normally. But I just had a Eureka moment while driving home today. Instead of Fitzroy just casting a spell with his own magic now after taking some deep breaths, we have some table talk.
How about we roll for it?
Okay. Roll a d20 and add your spellcasting modifier.
Festo's method of getting Fitzroy to be in touch with his own magic reminds me a lot of helping someone to develop a healthy coping mechanism. In the epilepsy analogy, Fitzroy learns that it's not enough to have his service animal or to take his medication, but also that he has to make changes in his life and behavior. He has to change the way he thinks and approaches situations, and needs to be able to figure out healthy strategies to avoid his triggers. And the beautiful thing is, Griffin decides to roll for the success of this first attempt, and Travis, as the DM, takes him up on that, and he just goes with it. A d20 with Fitzroy's spellcasting modifier applied to the roll. I would equate this spellcasting modifier to basically be Fitzroy's experience and knowledge about his condition so far. Learning new skills in any kind of therapy and making accommodations to your life are also no instant guarantee towards success. Your first try might not make you feel instantly better. Your second try might not either. You might need to find a thought system that works for you. You may have to find a way that works for you specifically. Making the finding your own magic dependent on the success of a role is absolutely brilliant. It's beautiful.
So, moving forward, you're going to roll a d20 and add your spellcasting modifier, and anything that you can think of that would help Fitzroy to clear his mind and do anything like that will grant you bonuses and advantage and anything like that.
Cool.
But it's going to be all about Fitzroy learning to deal with his anxieties and his blocks and everything.
For sure.
And conquer the magic within.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Again, I need to stress a magic equals seizures analogy usually only goes so far until it falls apart. Graduation at least manages to surpass the usual expectations that I have towards any type of media. With this mechanic, spellcasting still proves to be a challenge. Fitzroy isn't magically cured, or just needed to focus better, or get in touch with whatever the fuck, and then the problem is just gone forever. Things will be better. Things can be better. But it will take time, and changes are made in small steps. There will be successful and unsuccessful days. After this episode, Fitzroy learns to use his own magic to cast spells. I personally think it is only really in the last 2 to 3 episodes where the wild magic equals epilepsy thing really does not work at all anymore. I am specifically thinking about the final fight, in which all characters on the battlefield experience amplified and rapid wild magic effects, such as being transformed into kittens, a stop-motion set, or other fun random things happening. The final battle is one of my favorite events in Graduation, but I think it also clearly marks the definite end for the entire epilepsy equation that I have going on here. It's okay if not every aspect of wild magic or chaos magic aligns with whatever the fuck I project onto it. I use the word representation a lot in this essay, but to be honest, I don't quite think it is the right word for what I want to say. TAZ Graduation is not perfect epilepsy representation because it was never set out to be. But nonetheless, it makes me feel understood. It makes me feel understood on a fundamental human level. My reading into the media can only go so far, and not every game beat, plot point, and resolve will match this reading. Speaking of not matching the analogy, I want to mention another piece of media and quickly compare it to TAZ Graduation. I hate to say it, but the last time I recognized my own experiences related to epilepsy in a piece of media that clearly was not intended to represent them was when I was reading Harry Potter as a teen. Please skip to the timestamp shown if you don't want to hear about this franchise. I used to relate a lot to Harry's first encounter with the Dementors, because the way he was treated after recovering from this encounter on the train, it was heavily reminiscent of how people interact with you after hearing you've had a seizure. Back when I liked the idea that by mastering a spell I could keep the seizures at bay, I was cycling through different medications and trying to find one that would work. I would know that the medication did not work when I kept having seizures. Nowadays, I think the idea of a spell that fixes all shifts the blame for suffering towards the spellcaster. If you don't cast the spell correctly, it's your fault and you only have yourself to blame. So, that's not a healthy mindset to carry around when your meds aren't working as intended. Also, there is this whole occlumency thing in the 5th book, where the situation again feels very reminiscent of Harry experiencing seizures. He has mind visions of Voldemort's shenanigans. He is told he has to stop having them. In hindsight, the magic stuff equals seizures analogy does not allow for a positive interpretation. All I can really take away from him getting occlumency lectures is, you gotta put up with an abusive healthcare professional and maybe just try harder to not have a seizure, or else you will get one of the people you care about hurt. Stuff like this is among the reasons why it's hard to find good material to project your epilepsy struggles onto. The components are there, the emotions written mirror your own experiences, the solutions to the struggles do not translate. And this is why Graduation is so much better in this aspect. While Fitzroy receives blame for the damage his wild magic causes, the story makes it clear to the audience that he had no control over the magic outburst and consequences, and I think that is a much better way to depict seizures. Sure, Fitzroy gets his magic crab, his understanding of his magic improves, but this doesn't mean he's free of magic outbursts. Receiving treatment and therapy won't make your symptoms and triggers go away in an instant. It's continuous work, and sometimes your best efforts just mean you have less severe symptoms than before, and that is the best status quo you can reach at that time, and that's okay. It's a much healthier and better depiction of struggling with a chronic condition than an attack by evil monsters ever could be. The McElroys have managed to depict continuous struggle with a chronic condition, including biases, discrimination, and condescension brought towards Fitzroy by others, but also healthy and unhealthy coping mechanisms with said diagnosis and what a great support system can look like. The way these components came together resulted in something extremely close to brilliance. I want to briefly touch upon why wild magic in general is a great thing to play about with. In Dungeons & Dragons, each player chooses a class for the character. The class informs most of the character's abilities and fighting style. Sorcerers usually draw their magic powers from either an ancestor within their bloodline or an encounter with a magic source. As stated before, epilepsy can be something that is being passed down through the generations of a family, or it can be caused by an accident or some sort of brain injury. The source of a sorcerer's magic can be unknown, which is great because the source and cause of epilepsy is, for a lot of people, a vast majority, it is unknown. They don't know what caused their seizures and their epilepsy. So, I don't know what caused the magic, I don't know what caused the seizures. It's great. One of these sources is wild magic. So, I want to quote from the player handbook right now. Starting when you choose this origin at first level, your spellcasting can unleash surges of untamed magic. Once per turn, the DM can have you roll a d20 immediately after you cast a sorcerer spell of first level or higher. If you roll a 1, roll the Wild Magic search table to create a magical effect. The Wild Magic table holds a long list of fun magic events. The standard table by Wizards of the Coast is, if anything, rather harmless and does not necessarily endanger the character all too much. But there are games and versions of this table that are a lot more lethal to the character and possibly others. Choosing wild magic as your source for your powers means that you are okay with unexpected things to happen to you and your character, things that can cause you disadvantages in the game or accidents or consequences that will follow your character permanently for the rest of the game. This type of chaos, however, can add a lot of extra fun and unexpected situations into the mix, And if player and DM are up to it, interesting narratives can be spun around it. What I really love about its hard-to-predict nature is that this comes close to how I experience seizures. The character can use spells, so I can do things, but they never know if putting themselves under the stress of casting a spell will also spawn an unwanted side effect, aka a seizure, that might cause harm to themselves. While seizures are, generally speaking, not dangerous to other people in itself, if someone who is, for example, driving a vehicle is experiencing them, they could cause an accident where other people are also coming to harm. And framing magic powers as something not to be desired, but something that truly comes with a constant and permanent setback, is something that is very interesting to watch, but hard to pull off right. Now, the magic as disability trope is one that is not done well a lot of times. There is so much to unpack here. It crushes the actual volume of what I want to talk about in this video and would require a lot more extra research. TAZ Graduation is not innovative in using the magic as a sort of disability trope, but I think the way that Fitzroy struggles with it, the fact that it destroyed his chance to attend his dream education, and how he is shown to feel resentment towards it for quite a long time, even once he started mastering spells, this is done particularly well. I must say, I enjoy this trope a lot more with the help of the Wild Magic table than what I've seen so far in other media. Because of the game mechanic, the writers, so to speak, or the players, they do not have complete authority over just making your disability go away when it becomes a serious inconvenience to the plot or the game. If anything, Fitzroy slowly learning to adapt and utilize his magic can be seen as him coming to terms with his diagnosis, and the treatment and coping mechanisms he can use to get a better control over his situation. It also means he has to evaluate risks and has to decide when is it actually worth risking something happening by casting a spell and when is it not worth doing so. Pacing yourself is a big part of a lot of chronic illness and disability experiences. This brings a certain realism and truthfulness to how seizures mess with your life. You can't just rely on them not being a thing again. Maybe writers should just throw dice to see if or when a disability flare-up happens. This is not a serious recommendation, it's more like a thought experiment. I wonder if this would cause a more organic implementation of certain disability representation things. I want to admit, however, that it is genuinely very difficult to balance this entire walk of disability representation and how to implement it in a major character in your story, especially if you do it intentionally. The representation that I found within TAZ Graduation may be accidental and, for all intents and purposes, not intended by the creators. However, it does not really matter to me if it was intended or not. And that's why, before I wrap this video up, I want to talk about why unintentional representation matters. First, there are so many medical situations and phenomena with a lot of diversity and uniqueness to each case. It can be impossible to find media that actually depicts your own experience in a super accurate way. Depending on genre and media that you're into, you may end up walking through life without ever feeling seen or understood. Media and stories can lend us the knowledge that out there are people like us. Or, in the very least, there are people who can fathom how we feel. All this, of course, can and should coexist with intentional representation. It is valuable and important that we understand and engage with the way various types of people experience the world. I am all for accurate and specific representation, but I think there is value in the unintentional. The next argument in favor of unintentional representation of medical conditions and disabilities is focus. This may be a very epilepsy-centric thing, but I find a lot of on-screen epilepsy representation lackluster, and it serves more as an introduction to the unknowing audience. It basically just introduces that this condition exists, rather than focusing on the character with epilepsy. Epilepsy and seizures are often depicted as a tragic event, as a spectacle, or a smite of fate. Bystanders react and are shook and sad over the character who suffers the seizure, or in worst case, they are shown to be afraid of the character with the seizure, which, while not inaccurate, is also fostering the stigma around seizures. Call me insensitive, but I don't care about how shaken up all the bystanders and watchers are when they see a seizure. I don't care about dramatic camera panning, and I don't care about acting out the seizure. I don't want to witness a spectacle when I see epilepsy representation. I very much prefer seeing the character with the seizure adjust their life and choices around the diagnosis. Epilepsy isn't just has a seizure, and when there is no seizure, everything is fine. It's not a binary on-off switch. Show me how the character choices are connected to their condition. Be it that they are in denial and keep pushing their limits and endanger themselves, or be it that they are careful and avoidant. Seizures aren't a spectacle for you to gawk at and to feel sorry for the person. Make yourself useful, administer first aid if necessary, and be kind. Unintentional representation is great, because it proves to us that there are people out there who are able to love and support us for who we are. We are not alone in a pool of emotions. There are lifeboats and people willing to help and empathize with our own situation, even if they have never experienced a situation like ours. And that's important to know and very important to realize. Otherwise, you're just lonely. The audio snippets that I showed you during this video, cutting them back to back while editing, really made me go, I'm 100% sure I've had conversations that exactly had this vibe. I showed this clip of the episode 1 moments of Fitzroy being called a failure. I showed this back to back to another person, to a friend of mine with disabilities, not epilepsy. And they also went like, oh yeah, I feel like I've heard exactly that type of stuff. Even if it was not intended to be that way, this type of invisible disability rep, it's well made. It's just well made. I take so much enjoyment out of the awkwardness out of these conversations because I go, yeah, that's my life. I love it. I love that this is my life. This is the most accurate epilepsy rep without actual epilepsy representation that I've ever seen. Changed my mind. Thank you very much for watching. Since I've talked a lot about medication, let me know what ridiculous shape or size yours has. I've heard about triangles and hexagons before. Mine are just weird, like self-dissolving pills. And they kind of look like the poison capsules from Detective Conan, so that's very reassuring. The images you've seen me draw during this video, those are renditions of my interpretation of the Epilepsy Fairy. She was created by Tumblr user Fuck Epilepsy. She takes whatever form is best suited to her purposes, which are unknowable to human beings. I personally like to say she does not need legs to hunt you. I don't know if I will ever do anything like this again. Do me a favor, learn Epilepsy First Aid, make sure that the people on your campus and work know how to do it. It's a great thing to learn about first aid and Epilepsy First Aid. Yeah, just freshen up your knowledge on all of that. In the description of the video, I've linked a couple of organizations linked to epilepsy that you can donate to if you wish to do so. At the end of the year, I plan on releasing my animated short, Carry On. And by short, I mean 8 minutes of 2D animation, which deals with the topic of domestic abuse against men. So if that is something that interests you, come back in December. Okay, now that the credits are rolling, I suppose this now has credits, as I'm pretty sure I've reached the almost 1 hour mark in this video. I can just quickly reveal, so one of the major aspects of why I also like to headcanon Fitzroy with epilepsy is just because he uses a bunch of electricity-based spells. And there is this thing in the epilepsy community where we essentially say this character has epilepsy if they have some sort of powers related to electricity. Because at the end of the day, epilepsy is caused by electronic signals in the brain kind of misfiring and causing a whole lot of things. So a character with electricity powers, there's a lot to do there with from them losing control to them using their electricity powers in the end to maybe even treat their seizures and their epilepsy, or just, yeah, it's a nice theme to have. It's a nice coincidence that Fitzroy just happens to also have a lot of thunder or electricity-based spells. I appreciate that. We're at the end of the video. I don't know why you're still here. But since you're still here, if you're wondering why this essay at times feels all over the place or jumps a bit much in topic and subject, that is mostly because at times I had to add additional recordings and bits after recording the original script because I realized there was an aspect missing. I couldn't find a better way to fit it in. I didn't want to record the thing again because I was already editing the video. So if it feels all over the place, I don't know what to say.